Good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction. I am here representing September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, an organization founded by family members of those who died on the 9/11 attacks who advocate for alternatives to violence in counterterrorism. Our organization was founded in the aftermath of the loss of our loved ones, out of a concern that the U.S. response to 9/11 would lead to further civilian death, a concern that very tragically has become a reality. On September 11th, my father, Brian Murphy, was killed in the attacks on the World Trade Center, along with nearly 3,000 others. Just 3 months later, on this day in 2002, the Bush administration established the detention center at Guantanamo Bay to illegally and indefinitely detain Muslim men and boys with the purported goal of counterterrorism and defending America. As we've heard today, these individuals have spent decades being tortured and then unlawfully detained, an entire lifetime behind bars, most of who were held without and are still being held without any justification. I was 5 years old on 9/11 and was not old enough to understand the actions taking place in the name of my father and other victims. As I grew older, I learned more about the violence and torture that the U.S. enacted in the name of 9/11 victims in Iraq, Afghanistan, at Guantanamo, and beyond. In 2017, I discovered Peaceful Tomorrows and learned about the atrocities that occurred at Guantanamo Bay in the aftermath of 9/11. The following year, I traveled to the naval base at Guantanamo to watch pretrial hearings in the 9/11 case against 5 men accused of planning the attacks. My trip to Guantanamo confirmed my suspicions that the legal charades taking place for 16 years with no end in sight were no substitute for justice. I saw that in addition to representing one of the major human rights abuses of our generation, the torture enacted by our government delayed and ultimately has prevented any meaningful opportunity for justice or accountability for 9/11 victims. The prosecution claimed to represent people like me and my family. They claimed that they're seeking justice, but all I saw was an attempt to justify what the U.S. did and to avoid any accountability for its own crimes. Today marks the 22nd anniversary of the opening of the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. 22 years too many. Thank you. We must be clear. War crimes by one do not justify war crimes by another. We must learn from the legacy of 9/11 and its tragic aftermath. It's time for the U.S. to acknowledge the torture that took place, to take accountability for the racist policies that enabled and justified it, and to close Guantanamo once and for all. The case against the 9/11 accused must reach a plea deal, and all other detainees must be released in order to move beyond and end cycles of violence and war. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on. Yeah, right on.